And that makes me king! See? See? I've got it! You're back in that tower for the rest of your days!
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Q-Man channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Today, we are going to be discussing the movie Shrek from 2001. The swamp, a place of solitude for the ogre Shrek, is rudely interrupted by a sudden influx of fairy tale creatures, all banished there by the decree of the diminutive Lord Farquaad. Shrek, a creature whose very existence seems to challenge traditional notions of heroism, finds this forced cohabitation intolerable. His desire for peace leads him directly to Duloc, a kingdom built on artificial perfection and governed by the famously short ruler. Farquaad, eager to secure the throne by marrying a princess, strikes a deal with Shrek: rescue Princess Fiona from a dragon-guarded tower, and Farquaad will clear the swamp. This quest, essentially a reality television setup for Farquaad's ego, sets the stage for an unlikely partnership. Accompanying Shrek on this journey is Donkey, a verbose and relentlessly optimistic animal whose relentless chatter contrasts sharply with Shrek's gruff exterior. Donkey, in his boundless enthusiasm for adventure and friendship, mirrors the kind of steadfast, perhaps overly eager, supporting roles often seen in classic Hollywood buddy films. Their initial interactions are fraught with annoyance, but a shared danger, the dragon guarding Fiona, forces a grudging respect. Princess Fiona, locked away high in the fortress, is not the damsel Shrek expects. She possesses an inner strength, honed by years of isolation, that belies her royal facade. Her secret, one that governs her entire existence, is revealed slowly. She is cursed, transforming every night into an ogre. This detail adds a layer of personal tragedy to her plight, connecting her in a strange way to Shrek's own misunderstood nature. The journey back is where the dynamics truly shift. Shrek, initially motivated purely by the contract, begins to feel an unfamiliar warmth toward Fiona. He sees past the princess facade to the genuine person beneath, a person whose nightly transformations echo his own hidden self. Fiona, meanwhile, finds in Shrek an honesty and lack of pretense she has never encountered in the polished courts of men. Their shared meals, their bickering over music, small moments that build a powerful, non-traditional romance, reminiscent of older romantic comedies, where the mismatched pair finds common ground through shared adversity. The climax arrives when Shrek, overcome by the fear that Fiona will discover his true feelings, and perhaps his perceived ugliness, allows Donkey to escort her the final leg to Duloc alone. This self-sabotage stems from a deep-seated insecurity, a reflection of how societal expectations crush those who don't fit the mold. When Shrek finally bursts into the wedding ceremony, interrupting the union between Fiona and the diminutive Farquaad, the scene is pure melodrama, a necessary disruption of Farquaad's manufactured order. The final confrontation is less a battle of might and more a clash of ideals. Farquaad, exposed as a petty tyrant obsessed with image, is swiftly dispatched by the now fully transformed dragon, who turns out to have a soft spot for romance. With the villains gone, Shrek and Fiona face their truth. The morning reveals Fiona's ogre form, but instead of repulsion, Shrek shows acceptance. It's the ultimate validation for both characters. Beauty isn't about appearance, but about finding someone who accepts the whole messy reality. Their wedding, celebrated in the swamp with the entire fairy tale community present, is a quiet victory for authenticity over artifice, a final satisfying note in a story that champions the outsider. The initial confrontation with Lord Farquaad in his meticulously ordered kingdom of Duloc is a study in contrasts. Farquaad, a man whose very physical stature seems to fuel an almost manic drive for power and outward grandeur, views Shrek with a mix of disgust and calculation. His court, obsessed with protocol and superficial presentation, a thinly veiled satire of Hollywood's insistence on polished veneers, can barely stomach the sight of the swamp-dwelling ogre. Shrek, a character seemingly inspired by the misunderstood monster tropes of early cinema, desires only the return of his privacy, a quiet existence far from the judgmental eyes of the kingdom. This transactional arrangement, the agreement to rescue the princess, is Shrek's ticket back to solitude. Donkey's contribution to the Fellowship is immediate and overwhelming. He is a fountain of unsolicited advice and unending narrative commentary, a comedic foil whose energy rivals that of the most frantic vaudeville straight men. His dialogue is relentless, a stream of consciousness that mirrors the persistent need for connection that Shrek actively represses. As they travel toward the Dragon's Keep, Donkey begins to see the hidden decency beneath Shrek's thorny exterior, much like an earnest supporting character in a classic Western, slowly realizes the outlaw hero has a heart of gold. Princess Fiona is introduced as the archetypal fairy tale captive, yet her first scenes quickly undermine this expectation. Her fighting skills, demonstrated effortlessly when dispatching the merry men, suggest an independence Farquaad certainly wasn't expecting. Her internal conflict, the decades spent diligently adhering to the true love's first kiss protocol to break her curse, is a heavy burden. This curse makes her a spiritual sibling to Shrek. They are both beings forced to hide a monstrous aspect of themselves from a world terrified of the unfamiliar. The shared realization of their shared secret, occurring during a moonlit night where Fiona's transformation is witnessed by Shrek, is a pivotal, tender moment, far removed from the grandiose romantic gestures of courtly love. It is a kinship born of shared monstrosity. The return journey emphasizes the growing emotional intimacy. The bickering over singing voices, Donkey's enthusiastic yet off-key contributions versus Shrek's deep-seated discomfort with performing, is a playful acknowledgement of their differing approaches to life. Shrek, whose earlier life must have involved constant rejection, begins to let down his emotional guard, finding in Fiona someone who sees the swamp and not just the beast standing in it. This budding relationship feels earned because it develops through shared hardship and mutual understanding of isolation, rather than through manufactured courtly flirtation. Shrek's catastrophic decision to push Fiona away before the wedding is perhaps the most heartbreaking moment, an internalization of decades of societal critique. He believes he is protecting Fiona from the truth of his nature, choosing self-imposed exile over the almost certain pain of rejection. This mirrors the hesitation seen in actors who fear taking on roles that might shatter their established public image, opting for the safer path even when their heart pulls them toward risk. The final intrusion into the wedding, a highly staged, highly public event designed purely for Farquaad's advancement, is Shrek's explosive declaration of self-worth. He rejects the need for Farquaad's permission or societal approval. The subsequent resolution, where the dragon, a character whose existence is purely primal and passionate, intervenes decisively against the petty tyrant, clears the stage for authenticity. Fiona's choice, embracing her true, permanent ogre form upon kissing Shrek, a kiss that breaks the curse by fulfilling the true love requirement with the right partner, is the film's thesis statement. The celebration in the swamp, messy, green, and utterly genuine, affirms that true belonging is found not in fitting in, but in being completely accepted exactly as one is. The oppressive atmosphere of Duloc, with its polished cobblestones and unnervingly cheerful citizens, serves as the perfect antithesis to Shrek's earthy reality. Lord Farquaad, whose diminutive stature seems directly proportional to his towering ego, is a master manipulator of image, a tiny king building an empire on borrowed fairy tale iconography. His desperation for a queen is not about companionship but about legitimacy. He needs the royal seal of approval, a visual augmentation to compensate for what he lacks in physical presence. Shrek, in this context, is the necessary, ugly tool to acquire this prop. Donkey, with his ceaseless stream of anecdotes and existential observations, functions as the engine of exposition and emotional penetration. He is the uninvited guest who overstays his welcome, but ultimately forces the host out of his shell. His unwavering belief in the possibility of friendship, even with a creature as determinedly solitary as Shrek, showcases a naive optimism that veteran storytellers often use to break down cynicism. His voice, constantly filling the silence, is a metaphor for the internal noise we all suppress until an external force, in this case, Donkey's insistent prodding, forces a response. Princess Fiona's internal struggle with her knightly transformation elevates her role beyond that of a mere prize. She is a performer, trapped in a role she didn't choose, rehearsing her lines of princess propriety for years. The vulnerability she shows to Shrek when her secret is revealed is raw, the kind of shared confession that forges bonds stronger than any political alliance. It's a moment reminiscent of dramatic actresses finally shedding the constraining costumes of their famous roles to reveal the complex human beneath the makeup. She is not just waiting to be saved, she is waiting to be understood. The development of the romance is marked by quiet rebellions against convention. Their shared journey through the forest forces them to confront primal needs, shelter, food, and genuine conversation, away from the stifling rules of the court. When Shrek hesitates to kiss Fiona, believing she deserves a conventional prince, it's a testament to his ingrained understanding of his own social standing. He assumes his lack of traditional heroism disqualifies him from happiness. This self-deprecating belief is the core conflict, the inner critic given monstrous form. The climax at the altar is less about stopping a wedding and more about interrupting a performance of inauthenticity. Farquaad's reaction to the monstrous reveal is swift and tyrannical, a final, desperate attempt to control the narrative by eliminating the ugly truth. The dragon's intervention, a burst of instinctual loyalty and affection toward Donkey, provides a surprising, almost operatic resolution to the subplot, while clearing the way for the central couple. Fiona's conscious choice to remain an ogre is the ultimate act of self-determination. She rejects the external definition of beauty imposed by the fairy tale world, the fragile princess, in favor of the messy, powerful truth she found with Shrek. Their shared transformation solidifies their union. They are two outsiders who have chosen to create their own sanctuary. The wedding, messy and loud in the swamp, is celebrated not by knights and lords, but by a community of outcasts, a validation that the greatest triumph in life is achieving authentic belonging on one's own terms. The aftermath of the swamp wedding marks a profound shift in the social landscape of the fairy tale world. Shrek and Fiona's union, far from being a hidden transgression, becomes a loud, unapologetic statement. The fairy tale creatures, initially banished and living in uneasy, crowded proximity, find a new kind of leader in the ogre couple. Their existence, once defined by the whims of a petty tyrant like Farquaad, now finds strength in collective difference. This is not merely the establishment of a new monarchy, but the quiet genesis of a counterculture, rooted in the understanding that exclusion breeds misery, while acceptance fosters community. Donkey, ever the enthusiastic cultural ambassador, plays a vital role in integrating the disparate fairy tale population. His newfound partnership with the dragon, a relationship built on surprising mutual affection and a shared enjoyment of high-altitude surveillance, brings an element of flamboyant protection to the swamp settlement. This unlikely pairing, much like the odd couple dynamic celebrated in many successful animated features, highlights the film's core theme. Love finds the path of least resistance, often through the most unexpected avenues. The dragon, shedding her terrifying reputation, becomes the protective spirit of this burgeoning sanctuary, her fiery presence now a symbol of fiercely guarded belonging rather than mere threat. Shrek, who spent the entire film fighting to reclaim his solitude, discovers that true peace is found not in isolation, but in shared existence with someone who sees him completely. His gruff exterior softens, not disappearing entirely, for a true character's core traits remain, but becoming less a shield and more a comfortable jacket. He learns to navigate the necessities of social interaction, spurred on by the boisterous needs of Donkey and the loving presence of Fiona. This evolution reflects the journey of many seasoned artists or intellectuals who, after years of protective reclusion, realize their work or their truth is richer when shared, even if it means accepting the occasional noise and intrusion. Fiona, finally free from the obligation of a preordained narrative, embraces her permanent form with a gusto that shocks those who still cling to the idea of the perfect princess. Her ogre strength is now paired with an unburdened spirit. She brings a pragmatic royalty to the swamp, one based on fairness and direct action rather than inherited privilege. The swamp transforms from a refugee camp into a thriving, if unconventional home, filled with the sounds of laughter and robust, slightly muddy celebration. The narrative concludes not with a return to a former status quo, but with the joyful, messy creation of a new one, where the measure of a life is determined by the depth of one's acceptance, both of others and of the self. The acceptance achieved by Shrek and Fiona sends reverberations throughout the fairy tale realm, signaling a significant victory for authenticity over the carefully curated illusion. The fairy tale creatures, suddenly liberated from Farquaad's restrictive regime, begin to shed the roles society had forced upon them. The ugly stepsisters, perhaps, find a new niche in marshland beautification, while the three little pigs, no longer fleeing predatory breaths, might start experimenting with more robust, brick-based architectural endeavors. The world, previously constrained by rigid archetypes, the hero, the villain, the damsel, now seems infused with the possibility of narrative revision. Donkey and the Dragon's partnership becomes the vibrant, slightly chaotic banner for this new era. Donkey's persistent need for affirmation finds its anchor in the dragon's fierce, protective loyalty. Their dynamic, often played for laughs due to the sheer improbability of their pairing, serves a deeper narrative function. It validates that connection transcends physical form or established expectation. The dragon, once the ultimate symbol of solitary danger, now channels her powerful energy into defending her chosen family, much like a seasoned studio executive might fiercely protect a groundbreaking, unconventional project that others initially dismissed. Shrek's transformation is subtle, yet profound. He trades the isolating comfort of his perimeter warnings for the shared space of mutual love. The silence he once guarded so fiercely is now punctuated by the comfortable, overlapping narratives of his new life. He discovers that while an ogre's life might attract scrutiny, a shared ogre life, buttressed by Donkey's antics and Fiona's grounded strength, creates an impenetrable fortress of belonging. This mirrors the experience of acclaimed creatives who, after years of guarding their privacy, find that the very act of sharing their life story only deepens their audiences, or in this case, their community's affection. Fiona, now fully embodying her ogre identity, is the picture of empowered confidence. Her royal bearing is now innate, derived from self-knowledge rather than inherited title. She takes charge of organizing the community, ensuring that the marginalized creatures are not just tolerated, but actively integrated. The narrative closes on this image of thriving, unconventional domesticity. A celebration where the mud is optional, the songs are loud, and the defining characteristic of every attendee is the shared understanding that being deemed an outsider by the mainstream is often the greatest qualification for true happiness. The swamp, once in exile, has become the epicenter of a quiet green revolution. The establishment of the swamp as a haven is cemented by the community's enthusiastic adoption of their unconventional leaders. The banished fairy tale populace, having witnessed the defeat of Farquaad's sterile tyranny, pours its pent-up energy into rebuilding their existence on grounds of mutual respect. The gingerbread man, for instance, whose past experiences involved interrogation and breaking under pressure, now seems utterly unbowed, perhaps finding a new sense of corporate security within the collective. The collective mood shifts from anxious survival to celebratory creativity, proving that imposed conformity stifles vitality, whereas genuine acceptance unlocks latent potential within every creature. Donkey's influence extends beyond simple comic relief. He becomes the town crier and morale booster, his ceaseless optimism now serving a productive purpose rather than merely annoying Shrek. His relationship with the dragon, a symbol of the film's most extreme juxtaposition of traits, chatterbox and fire breather, becomes a celebrated oddity. The dragon's protective instincts are channeled into community defense, suggesting that even the most fearsome aspects of one's nature can be repurposed for good when placed within a loving context. This pairing often acts as the visual shorthand for the film's message: love ignores blueprints. Shrek finds a new rhythm in domesticity that he never anticipated. The man who believed he needed miles of muck between himself and civilization now tolerates, and even encourages, the occasional intrusion of a singing bird or a gossiping dwarf. His silence is replaced by contented grunts and shared glances with Fiona, communication that bypasses the need for verbose pleasantries he always despised. This transition reflects the quiet dignity found by veteran character actors who finally secure a role that allows them to reveal their true emotional depth, shedding the masks required by earlier, less forgiving genres. He is no longer simply surviving. He is flourishing within the parameters he once vehemently rejected. Fiona's reign, if one could call it that, is characterized by authenticity. She actively dismantles the lingering expectations of princesshood that lingered even after her transformation. Her physical strength, now permanent, is used to manage the practicalities of community living, demonstrating that leadership is about service and strength, not lineage or delicate manners. The final image of the core trio, the two ogres and the outspoken donkey, standing together, utterly at ease in their mud-splattered paradise, serves as a powerful rebuttal to every glossy fairy tale convention that preceded them. They have authored their own happily ever after, one built on shared monstrousness accepted as beautiful truth. The lasting impact of Shrek and Fiona's choice is felt not just within the bounds of their swamp, but as a seismic shift in the expectation of narrative closure. The conventional fairy tale ending demanded a return to pristine order and superficial beauty. This ending insists on the enduring value of the beautifully flawed. The very environment of the swamp, once defined by Shrek as a place of necessary ugliness, is now redefined by shared joy. The green ooze and the rustic, haphazard construction reflect a genuine creative process, much like an artist's studio filled with half-finished projects and vibrant messes, all bearing the mark of authentic labor, superior to any sterile gallery piece. Donkey's constant animation provides the lifeblood of the new community. His boundless energy, which once threatened Shrek's sanity, is now the necessary lubricant for social cohesion. He engages the nervous fairy tale folk, ensuring that even the shyest inhabitant feels seen, his booming voice cutting through any lingering shadows of doubt or oppression. His relationship with the dragon solidifies as a partnership of contrasting strengths. She offers unwavering, almost elemental defense, while he provides the constant stream of humanizing, or perhaps animalizing chatter, that keeps the atmosphere light. This duo embodies the necessary balance between fierce protection and light-hearted engagement needed to sustain any successful long-term venture, be it a marriage or a community. Shrek settles into a role of quiet, benevolent patriarch. His initial isolation was a defense mechanism born from a lifetime of projected fears. Now, those projected fears have been nullified by Fiona's unwavering gaze. He learns the subtle art of compromise, understanding that love requires accommodating the eccentricities of others, such as Donkey's penchant for spontaneous song or Fiona's need for robust outdoor activities. This maturity is the crowning achievement of his arc, showing that true strength lies not in pushing others away, but in drawing them close enough to share the burden and the joy. His contentment is visible in the relaxed set of his shoulders, a posture that screams contentment rather than simmering resentment. Fiona's permanent ogre form is the ultimate victory for self-actualization. She embodies the confidence that comes from having faced one's deepest fear and finding it was, in fact, the truest version of self. She brings a practical, earthy wisdom to the governance of their growing society, proving that the qualities valued in a traditional princess, compassion, resilience, and the ability to inspire loyalty, are far more potent when delivered without the cumbersome veneer of silk and etiquette. The final image is one of enduring partnership. Two powerful beings, defined by their perceived monstrosity, finding their greatest fulfillment not in changing for the world, but in forcing the world to accept them as they are, loud, green, and perfectly happy. The legacy of Shrek and Fiona's unconventional union begins to actively shape the cultural landscape beyond the swamp's immediate boundaries. The very definition of happily ever after undergoes a necessary revision in the collective consciousness of the fairy tale beings. No longer are they relegated to predefined roles awaiting a heroic rescue. They become proactive agents in their own narratives. This newfound autonomy is palpable in the way the community organizes itself, less like a kingdom under a single petty ruler, and more like a thriving, albeit extremely odd, cooperative. The collective experience of being marginalized has forged an unbreakable bond of solidarity, where difference is not merely tolerated, but celebrated as a necessary ingredient for a richer existence. Donkey's relentless pursuit of companionship culminates in a relationship that becomes the bizarre, beating heart of the community's social scene. His pairing with the dragon serves as an ongoing living performance piece, demonstrating that passion can bloom under the most unlikely conditions. The dragon's fiery temperament, once a clear sign of danger, is now an affectionate warning against outsiders who might threaten their peace, while Donkey's effervescence ensures that life never descends into the monotonous quiet Shrek once craved. This dyad represents the successful merging of two completely opposing forces, the loud and the silent, the fragile and the fierce, into a functional, loving unit, a testament to the expansive nature of true connection. For Shrek, the quiet acceptance found within his home life allows his underlying nature to surface in healthier ways. The gruffness remains, a signature trait as recognizable as any famous actor's distinct mannerism, but it loses its sting of defensiveness. He evolves from a recluse fighting against intrusion to a guardian embracing his role as protector of his chosen family. This transition reflects the arc of many influential figures who realize that their voice carries more weight when used in defense of others, rather than solely in self-preservation. He finds value in the noisy, messy reality of shared life, recognizing that the occasional annoyance from Donkey or the demands of community upkeep are small prices to pay for true belonging. Fiona, standing beside Shrek, is the very picture of empowered, self-defined royalty. She has shed the anxiety of waiting for external validation to break a curse. Her strength is now inherent and chosen. She effectively mentors the other fairy tale women, showing them that resilience doesn't require conforming to delicate standards. Her actions speak louder than any royal proclamation. Her sheer presence, vibrant and green, permanently alters the visual vocabulary of heroism. The final image of the three, Shrek, Fiona, and Donkey, sharing a moment of unscripted contentment, is the film's enduring message. The most beautiful stories are those written when the characters finally dare to ignore the established script and embrace the messy, wonderful truth of who they fundamentally are. The ripple effect of the swamp's transformation extended subtly into the wider-known world, forcing a re-evaluation of success metrics. Duloc, under the shadow of Farquaad's absurd, empty legacy, seemed to crumble not from force, but from irrelevance. A kingdom built solely on artifice cannot sustain itself when authenticity has proven itself to be the superior model. The fairy tale creatures, no longer bound by the oppressive standards of manicured perfection, began exporting their newfound confidence. We see hints of this in the way Pinocchio might approach future identity crises, perhaps with less panic over his nose and more focus on his artistic expression, now that societal pressure has eased. Donkey's role as the social nexus is paramount. He is the engine of spontaneous joy. His unwavering commitment to finding the good in every situation, often grating to the cynical, is precisely what the recovering community requires. His devotion to the dragon is the relationship that truly cements the film's commitment to defying categorization. It's a visual and emotional shorthand for unconditional acceptance, proving that shared spirit outweighs superficial compatibility. This pairing underscores the narrative's refusal to adhere to established cinematic pairings, favoring instead the electrifying chemistry of genuine connection, regardless of form. Shrek, finally able to inhabit his skin without constant vigilance, exhibits a profound, quiet contentment that serves as the emotional anchor for the narrative's resolution. His journey is a masterclass in overcoming internalized prejudice. The scars of a life spent being judged are not erased, but they cease to dictate his actions. He moves with the assuredness of someone who has fought a long, difficult battle and won the one war that mattered, the internal one. This subtle shift in posture and expression is more meaningful than any grand gesture, reflecting the satisfaction of a dedicated craftsman finally seeing their work universally appreciated, not for what it pretends to be, but for what it authentically is. Fiona becomes the community's living testament to resilience. Her choice to remain an ogre signifies a powerful rejection of the societal script that dictates female value is tied to fragility and conventional beauty. She integrates the physical power of her ogre form with the wisdom gained from her years of royal training, creating a leadership style that is both nurturing and fiercely protective. She embodies the idea that true royalty is earned through character, not birthright. The couple's life together is not one of perpetual honeymoon bliss, but one of active, engaged partnership, where disagreements are weathered and silence is comfortable, not isolating. Their swamp remains muddy, loud, and undeniably real, standing as a permanent, flourishing monument to the radical notion that true love means loving all the parts, even the green, the loud, and the perpetually misunderstood. The triumph of the swamp settlement is rooted in its very imperfection, serving as a powerful corrective to the sanitized fantasies peddled by the rest of the kingdom. The fairy tale creatures, having been forcibly gathered, now choose to stay, not out of obligation, but because the environment fosters genuine self-expression. Even minor characters like the often exiled Three Little Pigs find newfound purpose, perhaps moving beyond mere structural vulnerability to become expert builders of sturdy, unconventional dwellings suited to their unique neighbors. This collective realization, that shared struggle breeds better solutions than isolated conformity, is the true revolution sparked by Shrek and Fiona. Donkey's energy, which once felt like an intrusion upon Shrek's carefully constructed walls, is now recognized as vital communal noise. He is the chronicler of the mundane wonders of swamp life, ensuring that no small victory, a particularly clear sunrise over the bog, or a successful batch of swamp stew, goes uncelebrated. His bond with the dragon solidifies into an almost mythical protectorate. She represents the primal, untamed power willingly subjugated to the service of affection, while Donkey symbolizes the communicative bridge between the wild and the communal. Their loud public displays of devotion become a reassurance to the other inhabitants that their own strangest affections are valid and supported. Shrek, the reluctant hero who mistrusted his own capacity for goodness, finds an unexpected peace in shared responsibility. The burden of being the scary one is lifted because his most important relationship is based on seeing past that very facade. He is no longer defined by the threat he poses, but by the shelter he provides. This sense of earned belonging grants him a relaxed confidence that contrasts sharply with the nervous energy of his earlier life. It's the quiet dignity of an artist who has finally created a body of work that speaks its own, undeniable truth, independent of critical reception. Fiona's identity is the culmination of the film's themes. By choosing the ogre form permanently, she makes a definitive statement about agency over destiny. She embodies a kind of earthy, practical royalty, governing not through proclamation but through example. Her physical strength is matched by her emotional fortitude, creating a leader who is approachable, yet authoritative. The swamp, under their joint stewardship, becomes an allegory for a self-sustaining, inclusive society. The final lingering impression is not of a story ending neatly, but of a new, richer narrative beginning, one where the protagonists are finally comfortable enough in their own skin to welcome the world, or at least the world that matters, into their messy, vibrant, and fiercely defended home. The stability established in the swamp does not breed stagnation. Rather, it fosters a nuanced evolution in character, particularly as the community settles into a routine defined by mutual, if sometimes exasperated, affection. Shrek, having shed the heavy mantle of perpetual solitude, finds himself surprisingly adept at managing the domestic intricacies of a large, highly opinionated household. He learns to delegate, relying on Donkey's flair for the dramatic to handle matters of public relations with any stray travelers or inquisitive woodland creatures who might wander near their borders. This delegation is not a sign of weakness, but a mature understanding of individual talents. A lesson often learned by celebrated directors who trust their cast and crew to bring their respective visions to life. Donkey's trajectory continues to be one of relentless positive affirmation. His life with the dragon evolves into a bizarre yet functional domestic unit, providing endless, often unintentional, comic relief that serves to puncture any rising tide of overly solemn contemplation. The dragon, whose earlier existence was purely monolithic, guard, monster, protector, now displays subtle nuances of personality, primarily centered around her devotion to the overly energetic equine. This dynamic showcases the film's belief that even the most formidable reputations can be softened by genuine, unexpected connection, much like an established, intimidating screen legend finding unexpected warmth in a lighter, co-starring role. Fiona embraces her role as the pragmatic co-ruler with characteristic vigor. Her leadership style is direct, favoring clear action over courtly ambiguity, a trait perhaps honed during her long years of isolation where self-reliance was the only currency. She is instrumental in establishing sustainable practices within the swamp, ensuring that their haven can support the growing population of displaced fairy tale characters. She bridges the gap between Shrek's deep need for boundaries and Donkey's desire for constant celebration, finding the necessary middle ground that allows both personalities to thrive without friction. Her presence is a constant reminder that power derived from self-acceptance is infinitely more sustainable than power based on illusion or inherited position. The enduring theme becomes the cultivation of this chosen family. The swamp is no longer just a temporary refuge, it is the blueprint for a better world. The initial invasion by fairy tale creatures has culminated in a deeply interwoven society where the lines between monster and hero are functionally meaningless. The contentment is not loud or bombastic, but rather a deep, resonant hum of acceptance. This final tableau, set against the backdrop of their messy green home, affirms that the pursuit of happiness, when stripped of external expectations, leads invariably to a place characterized by honesty, mud, and unwavering, complicated love. The ongoing life in the swamp settles into a pattern best described as controlled chaos, a testament to the resilient, yet inherently contradictory, nature of its inhabitants. The very architecture of their settlement reflects this. A collection of haphazardly built, surprisingly sturdy homes, constructed from whatever materials the forest offered, standing in proud defiance of Duloc's precise geometry. This acceptance of structural imperfection mirrors their acceptance of emotional ones. Shrek's quiet guardianship manifests in subtle ways. He no longer patrols the perimeter with aggressive intent. Instead, his presence is felt as a grounding force. When the younger, more volatile fairy tale beings argue, perhaps a dispute between the wolf and the three little pigs over shared grazing rights, it is Shrek's low, rumbling sigh that cuts through the escalating tension more effectively than any shouted command. He has learned that true authority comes not from fear, but from the moral weight of a life lived authentically. His occasional rare bursts of boisterous laughter, usually triggered by one of Donkey's more absurd pronouncements, are cherished moments, treated like precious commodities by Fiona, who recognizes them as milestones in his ongoing process of emotional thawing. Donkey, meanwhile, has taken on the unofficial role of cultural liaison and chief morale officer. He manages the integration of new arrivals, perhaps a lost gnome or a disillusioned knight, with tireless, effusive enthusiasm, ensuring they understand the unwritten rules of swamp society. Honesty about one's flaws is mandatory, and silence is rarely welcome. His relationship with the dragon has moved into a phase of shared domesticity that defies easy categorization. They have established a rhythm where the dragon's occasional fiery needs are met with Donkey's earnest attempts at cooling things down, with dramatic flapping or well-timed, if entirely ineffective, water bucket maneuvers. This ongoing, peculiar courtship is the emotional proof point for the younger creatures. If they can make it work, anyone can. Fiona, shedding the last vestiges of her former maiden conditioning, utilizes her ogre strength with strategic grace. She oversees the swamp's agricultural efforts, ensuring the muck is optimally fertile for their unconventional vegetable patches, and acts as the primary mediator in complex disputes. She possesses the rare ability to address Shrek's deep-seated insecurities with gentle firmness, often mirroring his own pragmatic language back to him, but infused with love. When Shrek shows a flicker of the old self-doubt, perhaps retreating to a solitary corner, Fiona simply joins him, matching his stance, not arguing against his need for space, but filling that space with her own equally green, equally powerful presence, communicating without words. We are this now, together. The overall atmosphere is one of profound, earned peace. Their happily ever after is not a static destination, but an active, continuous process of maintaining boundaries while fiercely welcoming those who accept those boundaries for what they are. It is a community built on the understanding that true belonging requires vulnerability, And for Shrek, Fiona, and Donkey, this messy, magnificent state of being is the richest reward imaginable. The arrival of unexpected visitors, perhaps a delegation from a neighboring, far more conventional kingdom, tests this newfound equilibrium. The initial offering of Shrek in 2001 was more than just an animated fairy tale. It was a subversive dismantling of the very foundations upon which Disney had built its animated empire. This film arrived at a crucial juncture, following the waning of the Disney Renaissance, and positioned itself as the irreverent antidote to decades of sanitized fantasy. The core narrative, focusing on an ogre yearning for solitude, whose swamp is invaded by a motley crew of exiled fairy tale creatures, immediately establishes its thematic commitment to the outsider. Shrek himself is a fascinating protagonist, precisely because he rejects the established archetypes. Unlike the classically handsome heroes of traditional animation, Shrek embodies the grotesque and the misunderstood. His initial gruffness and desire for isolation are not inherent malice, but the product of lifelong societal rejection. This mirrors a certain strain in modern cinematic anti-heroes, those whose defense mechanisms are built from years of being labeled the villain. Mike Myers' vocal performance, heavily influenced by his experience evolving from the absurdist sketch comedy of Saturday Night Live to the layered character work in Austin Powers, lends Shrek a vital, grounded cynicism that prevents him from becoming merely a monster cliché. His Scottish brogue acts as an immediate cultural marker, pulling him away from the generic European fantasy settings and grounding him in a more specific, slightly rougher world. The dynamic pairing with Donkey, voiced by Eddie Murphy, provides the necessary counterpoint. Murphy, whose comedic career was rooted in high-energy stand-up and the rapid-fire dialogue of films like Beverly Hills Cop, injects the film with an almost manic energy. Donkey is the embodiment of desperate need for connection, a character who refuses to respect Shrek's carefully constructed boundaries. This relationship development is the film's emotional engine, moving from irritation to genuine, if begrudging, friendship. It is a classic odd couple structure, elevated by the understanding that both characters are perceived as societal irritants, one loud and bothersome, the other large and frightening. The introduction of Princess Fiona deepens the thematic complexity. Fiona is initially presented as the quintessential damsel in distress, a narrative trope Shrek and the audience are conditioned to expect. However, her secret, her own monstrous transformation at night, reframes the entire concept of the perfect princess. Her curse is a physical manifestation of the secret inadequacies or undesirable traits that people conceal to fit societal molds. Her yearning is not just to be rescued, but to be accepted as she is, curses and all. Cameron Diaz's performance balances the expectation of regal grace with a hidden wild athleticism and sharp wit, suggesting a character who has spent years practicing the performance of royalty. The antagonism provided by Lord Farquaad, the diminutive ruler of Duloc, is a masterful piece of characterization. Farquaad represents the obsession with polished superficiality and control. His entire kingdom, Duloc, is a sterile, highly regulated theme park imitation of true happiness, a direct critique of manufactured fantasy. Greg Kinnear's delivery imbues Farquaad with a smooth, almost unnervingly professional villainy, contrasting sharply with Shrek's earthy authenticity. Farquaad's desire to marry Fiona is purely transactional. He seeks a bride to make him kingly, not a partner. This is the ultimate rejection of true love in favor of political optics, a concept that resonated deeply with audiences weary of overly saccharine romance narratives. The film's aesthetic is also crucial. The integration of computer-generated imagery with more traditional storybook elements creates a unique visual texture. While the CGI models, particularly Shrek, possess a slightly rubbery quality compared to later advancements, this very imperfection lends the film a distinctive charm. Furthermore, the soundtrack, deliberately chosen for its contemporary, popular appeal, featuring tracks by Smash Mouth, intentionally alienated the score from the traditional orchestral sweep of Disney classics, further cementing its position as the rock and roll counterpoint to fairy tale cinema. The climax, involving the breaking of the curse, is not about achieving superficial beauty. It's about achieving mutual acceptance of the perceived ugliness. Shrek learning to accept love, and Fiona choosing her true, monstrous form over the expectation of conventional beauty, solidifies the film's core message. True identity often lies beyond the veneer of fairy tale perfection. The film successfully utilized established genre expectations only to dismantle them, paving the way for a new wave of animated storytelling that valued character depth and satirical commentary over simple wish fulfillment. The subversive power of Shrek is intrinsically linked to its refusal to shy away from the emotional undercurrents beneath the broad comedy. Shrek's initial retreat into the swamp is not merely a plot device, it's a profoundly relatable depiction of self-imposed exile born from chronic disappointment. He doesn't just dislike company, he actively prepares for it to be negative. This weary preparedness colors every interaction he has, turning his every defensive outburst into a sad, predictable monologue of received prejudice. Myers allows moments where the rough exterior cracks, revealing the vulnerable heart that desperately wants to belong, even as it fights against the very possibility of acceptance. When he expresses his desire for his private space, it feels less like a monster staking a claim and more like an introverted human pleading for personal boundaries that society never respected. Donkey serves as the relentless, necessary catalyst for Shrek's emotional thawing. Murphy's donkey operates on a frequency of pure, unadulterated need. He is loud, annoying, and utterly incapable of reading the room, but this is precisely why he penetrates Shrek's defenses. He reminds the audience that true connection often requires someone to ignore your explicit instructions to leave you alone. Donkey's relentless optimism, often bordering on delusion, especially concerning the potential for friendship with an ogre, is a comedic shield for his own deep-seated fear of solitude. His adoration of Shrek, however unwarranted it seems initially, eventually becomes a stabilizing force, showing Shrek that not all companionship is conditional. Fiona's arc presents the most nuanced critique of gender roles within the fantasy genre. Her internal conflict is tangible, the physical reality of her curse versus the cultural requirement for her to be the perfect demure bride. The reveal that she turns into an ogre at sunset isn't just a funny twist. It's the moment her true self aligns with the hero who shares her perceived monstrosity. Her competence, evidenced by her fighting skills demonstrated during the rescue attempt, already signals that she is no passive object. When she fights Shrek, there is an unexpected equality in their combat that speaks volumes about their shared outsider status, a physical manifestation of mutual understanding preceding verbal acknowledgement. The tension during the moonlight sequence where they realize their shared fate is heavy with relief rather than horror. They have found someone who doesn't need them to perform femininity or heroism. Lord Farquaad, whose physical stature is a constant running gag, embodies the profound insecurity that drives superficial ambition. His diminutive size seems to fuel an overcompensation complex. He needs the grandest castle, the most beautiful bride, and the most controlled environment, because he feels inherently small. His entire domain, Duloc, with its perfectly synchronized singing and dancing citizens, is a monument to forced conformity. It is the antithesis of Shrek's swamp, which, despite its messiness, is authentic. Farquaad's transactional view of marriage highlights the theme that power often corrupts the pursuit of love, reducing it to a political commodity, rather than a genuine emotional bond. His ultimate fate, being fed to Dragon, a creature embodying untamed primal power, is poetically just, as he is consumed by the very chaos he spent his life trying to legislate away. The film's genius lies in its structure. It lures the viewer in with the familiar framework of a quest narrative. The hero must save the princess for the villain, only to use that structure to subvert the expected conclusion. The destination of the quest is not the wedding, it is self-acceptance. When Shrek finally attempts to articulate his feelings, his dialogue is hesitant and clumsy, reflecting a character utterly unused to expressing intimacy. This raw, unpolished vulnerability stands in stark contrast to the slick, manufactured romance promised by Farquaad. The final acceptance by the townsfolk, grudging though it is, marks not just Shrek's assimilation into the world, but the world's reluctant recognition that happy ever after doesn't require uniformity. It requires tolerance for the beautifully imperfect. The lingering emotion the film leaves is one of earned contentment, earned through struggle against internalized shame and external judgment. The enduring impact of Shrek rests significantly on its skilled manipulation of audience expectations concerning the visual language of fantasy. The film consciously utilizes the recognizable iconography, the imposing stone castle, the glittering royal banners, the traditional quest structure, only to immediately stain them with mud, slime, and sarcasm. This juxtaposition ensures that the narrative remains grounded, even as it soars into magical territory. Duloc itself, the perfect, sanitized kingdom ruled by Farquaad, functions as a highly effective visual metaphor for the hollow perfection often peddled by mainstream entertainment. Its inhabitants are not individuals but synchronized automatons, embodying the sterile obedience that Farquaad demands in all aspects of life, including romance. Shrek's transformation throughout the film is mirrored internally by his gradual acceptance of vulnerability, a process catalyzed entirely by the unconventional support system he acquires. His initial defense mechanism, the snarling, the bellowing, the insistence on being feared, is a deeply internalized script written by society. When he tries to articulate his feelings to Fiona later in the film, the words catch, demonstrating how the habit of isolation has atrophied his emotional vocabulary. This struggle makes his eventual declaration of love feel hard-won and incredibly authentic, unlike the smooth pronouncements expected of princes. Donkey's role extends beyond mere comic relief. He is Shrek's unintentional therapist. His inability to understand social cues forces Shrek to articulate his grievances and desires out loud, often to the point of exasperation. Murphy's vocal calibration shifts subtly as the film progresses. While his early energy is manic and defensive, by the latter half, his concern for Shrek and Fiona carries a genuine, earnest weight, cementing his status as the film's moral compass, albeit a highly energetic one. He represents the necessity of unconditional friendship, the bond that forms simply because two mismatched individuals choose to navigate the world together. Fiona's narrative arc is perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the early 2000s animation landscape. Her secret curse serves as a brilliant allegory for the pervasive pressure on women, particularly in the public eye, to maintain an unchanging, idealized appearance. Her decision, culminating in the climax where she consciously chooses the monstrous form alongside Shrek, is a radical act of self-ownership. It reframes beauty not as an innate, flawless state, but as a state of mutual acceptance between partners. The visual transition during the curse-breaking sequence, where she remains an ogre while Shrek watches, is charged with high emotional stakes, far beyond the simple punchline it could have been. The realization that Shrek finds her beautiful in her true form allows her to shed the decades of internalized self-loathing associated with the daytime princess persona. The film's use of music, heavily leaning on pop and rock anthems instead of sweeping orchestral scores, intentionally positions it as a generational commentary. Smash Mouth's All Star acts as an anthem for the marginalized, perfectly scoring Shrek's march toward reluctant heroism. This auditory choice signaled to the audience that this was not a trip down memory lane, but a contemporary skewering of those very memories. Ultimately, Shrek succeeds because it validates the feeling of being perpetually misread by the world. It suggests that perhaps the monsters are the only ones honest enough to recognize the true nature of what they are looking for, and that happiness isn't found in marrying a king, but in finding someone who doesn't mind the swamp. The structural genius of Shrek lies not only in its successful subversion of classic fairy tale motifs, but also in its profound commentary on celebrity culture and the commodification of image, an element heavily amplified by Lord Farquaad's kingdom and the subsequent subplot involving the Hollywood parody. Farquaad's desperate need for a princess to legitimize his rule is a thinly veiled satire of superficial political maneuvering, where the perception of virtue, marrying a beautiful princess, is valued far above actual virtue. This quest for image becomes even more pointed when the film introduces the mechanism for obtaining Fiona, capturing Shrek, the marketable villain, to create a bargain. This turns the traditional hero's journey into a PR stunt, orchestrated by a small man obsessed with grand appearances. The subsequent journey to Duloc, and the introduction of the fairy godmother and Prince Charming in Shrek 2, though primarily set up in the first film's conclusion, solidifies this critique of manufactured perfection. Even within the confines of the first film, the initial dismissal of Shrek by the villagers, who only see the external horror rather than the complex individual, echoes the harsh, immediate judgments prevalent in media portrayals of public figures. Shrek is the original anti-celebrity. He actively seeks to be unmarketable. In contrast, Fiona, even under the curse, is genetically predisposed to be marketable, a princess whose very existence is tied to aesthetic expectation. Her ability to physically fight and then revert to a gentle demeanor shows the exhausting dual performance required of women in the public sphere. Strength when necessary, but always wrapped in beauty. The dynamic between Shrek and Donkey, particularly their banter on the road, frequently touches upon the theme of performance versus reality. Donkey constantly tries to frame their adventure in epic, heroic terms, using the language of fairy tales, while Shrek continually pulls the narrative back to the mundane, the inconvenient, and the messy truth of their situation. This constant friction between elevated fantasy language and grounded, cynical reality is the engine of the film's humor and its heart. It teaches the audience, through consistent comedic reinforcement, that life rarely adheres to the script, and that the most rewarding moments often arise when characters abandon the script entirely. Shrek's ultimate success is achieved not through a grand, perfectly executed heroic act, but through a moment of unscripted, terrified honesty. The film's visual palette, though employing early CGI, reinforces this thematic duality. The lush, vibrant, yet ultimately artificial colors of Duloc clash intentionally with the murky, earthy, and authentic greens and browns of Shrek's swamp. The swamp, initially presented as a negative space, a place to hide from judgment, is slowly reclaimed as a space of genuine comfort and belonging, a testament to the idea that one's true home is defined by the company kept, not by outward appearance or societal approval. This slow reclamation of space mirrors Shrek's own internal journey from self-loathing isolationist to a partner capable of profound, albeit clumsy, love. The exploration of archetypes in Shrek extends deeply into the very mythology of the fairy tale quest, revealing the inherent emptiness in goals pursued solely for external validation. Lord Farquaad's desire for a princess is not about love or companionship. It is about acquiring the final prop necessary to complete his self-constructed illusion of majesty. This need for a perfect accessory speaks volumes about the superficiality underpinning rigid hierarchical structures. His entire worldview is transactional, a very modern corporate approach to romantic fulfillment, making him a chillingly relevant villain for the dawning millennium. His frustration stems from the fact that the ideal bride, Fiona, harbors a secret that fundamentally corrupts her marketable image, thus threatening the entire facade of Duloc. The arrival of Dragon, initially presented as the monstrous obstacle guarding the prize, is another expertly handled subversion. Instead of remaining a terrifying guardian, Dragon evolves into an object of genuine, albeit unexpected, affection for Donkey. This pairing further emphasizes the film's central thesis. Attraction and compatibility are found in the most unlikely intersections, often blooming between those who are similarly excluded from conventional social circles. Donkey's immediate, unreserved admiration for Dragon contrasts sharply with Shrek's crippling self-doubt. Donkey, unburdened by years of societal conditioning telling him he's unworthy, approaches relationships with enthusiastic abandon. His attraction to Dragon, a creature of immense size and untamed power, is a hilarious affirmation that physical presentation matters far less to him than shared experience and immediate chemistry. Fiona's internal struggle around the curse is also deeply rooted in the concept of inherited narrative burden. She has been raised within the fairy tale system, taught that her only value lies in her eventual rescue and her flawless appearance. Her years spent locked away are not just imprisonment. They are years spent practicing a role for an audience that demands perfection. When she reveals her secret to Shrek, the emotion exchanged is not just horror, but a profound, weary recognition, a shared understanding of the societal lie they both embody. Shrek recognizes the burden of hiding one's true self, and Fiona recognizes the crushing weight of maintaining a perfect exterior. Their bonding over the shared experience of being perceived as monsters is the strongest foundation for their eventual bond, superior to any superficial attraction based on conventional beauty standards. The film's resolution, where Shrek and Fiona choose their ogre forms, is a triumphant rejection of narrative determinism. It argues that happiness is not the fulfillment of a pre-written ending, but the conscious choice to rewrite the ending based on authentic self-knowledge and mutual love. The townsfolk's final, hesitant acceptance is crucial. It shows that societal change is slow and often resistant, but ultimately, the power of genuine connection, witnessed publicly, can begin to shift entrenched prejudice. Shrek doesn't suggest that the world immediately becomes enlightened, but rather that the protagonists carve out a sovereign space where their truths are valid, regardless of outside opinion. This ending leaves the audience with a feeling of earned peace, a sense that true happily ever after is built on collaboration and shared imperfection, rather than passive rescue. The brilliance of the film's character construction lies in how deeply the internal emotional landscape informs the external comedic action. Shrek's cynicism is not merely a funny trait, it is a meticulously layered defense mechanism, suggesting that the deepest wounds come from failed expectations of belonging. His aggressive insistence on solitude is an attempt to preemptively control the inevitable disappointment that comes from human interaction, a consequence of his early life experiences which we can extrapolate involved being consistently cast as the bogeyman figure in children's stories. This mirrors the career trajectory of many comedic actors who start in abrasive, boundary-pushing material, like Myers's early work, eventually using that abrasive shell to protect moments of genuine pathos. Donkey, conversely, is the character who refuses to let the script adhere to Shrek's pessimism. His boundless, almost pathological need for companionship acts as a vital friction point. He is the personification of positive reinforcement, irritatingly insistent but ultimately necessary for Shrek's survival. Eddie Murphy brings a specific kinetic energy to Donkey, derived from his mastery of rapid-fire improvisation and physical comedy. This translates into a character who can never be ignored, thereby forcing Shrek out of his self-imposed stasis. Donkey's unwavering belief that Shrek is fundamentally good, despite all contrary evidence presented by Shrek himself, is the film's purest expression of grace. Fiona's duality is perhaps the most acutely felt burden. The princess who is trained to be aesthetically pleasing, a product groomed for the public gaze, must secretly contend with a physical reality that defies beauty standards. Her daytime performance as the demure noblewoman is exhausting, requiring constant vigilance to mask her wilder, more powerful nighttime self. This struggle resonates with anyone who feels they must present a curated, socially acceptable version of themselves while hiding a more authentic, perhaps messier, core identity. Her eventual union with Shrek is therefore not merely a romantic coupling. It is the merging of two individuals who can finally drop their respective masks. The moment she chooses to remain an ogre is her ultimate act of self-liberation, an articulation that her worth is inherent, not conditional on visual presentation. Lord Farquaad stands as the perfect foil because he represents the extreme opposite, a character who has no authentic self to hide or protect. He is pure artifice, a collection of performative traits designed to project power. His obsession with eliminating the imperfect fairy tale creatures, the very population that Shrek and Fiona eventually embrace, is a metaphor for a society that seeks to sterilize difference. Greg Kinnear's restrained, almost bored delivery of Farquaad's villainy underscores the idea that true evil often lacks passion. It is coldly bureaucratic and entirely motivated by insecurity projected outward as control. The sheer comedic irony of this tiny man demanding the ultimate trophy bride is the visual manifestation of overcompensation for perceived inadequacy. The film suggests that the loudest, most demanding voices often hide the greatest internal voids, filling them with purchased titles, polished castles, and staged romances. The film's narrative scaffolding, built upon the familiar tower of rescuing a princess, cleverly allows for a deep dive into the mechanics of storytelling and who gets to control the narrative. Shrek, initially a reluctant participant forced into the quest by Lord Farquaad's political maneuvering, becomes an agent of narrative disruption. He doesn't seek glory. He seeks quiet. His motivation is entirely negative, the removal of invaders, which starkly contrasts with the conventionally positive motivations of traditional fairy tale heroes driven by ambition or pure altruism. This sets the stage for the film's ultimate argument, that authentic satisfaction arises from self-directed goals, not inherited missions. The supporting cast of displaced fairy tale figures, Pinocchio, the Three Little Pigs, the Gingerbread Man, are not merely background gags. They represent the collateral damage of a rigid narrative system that has no place for deviation. They are refugees from stories where they were clearly defined villains or comedic sidekicks, now dumped unceremoniously onto Shrek's property because the established system has no use for their complexity. Their presence forces Shrek, and by extension the audience, to confront the inherent cruelty embedded in simple categorization. The wolf must be bad, the puppet must lie, the giant must be feared. Shrek's swamp becomes, therefore, an accidental haven for the misfits of mythology. The introduction of the fairy godmother in the context of the follow-up story, but foreshadowed by the stakes established here, often explores the manufacturing of destiny, a critique that begins earnestly in the first film. Farquaad's reliance on the external performance of royalty, the princess, is the earthly manifestation of the magical coercion employed by figures like the godmother. Both seek to impose a pre-approved, visually pleasing outcome onto messy reality. The film is essentially asking, what happens when the individuals who do not fit the aesthetic mold decide to write their own happily ever after, bypassing the gatekeepers of traditional beauty and power? The emotional climax of Shrek and Fiona's acceptance hinges on the visual transformation. When Fiona sheds her daytime disguise and embraces her ogre form, and Shrek drops his protective shell of anger, the shared ugliness becomes the ultimate bond. It is a visual statement that authenticity requires mutual vulnerability. This contrasts powerfully with the manufactured beauty Farquaad sought. The film posits that real intimacy is found in the recognition of shared flaws, not in the celebration of shared superficial perfection. The lingering emotional resonance is the quiet triumph of finding a safe space in an intolerant world, achieved not through heroism, but through radical self-acceptance, validated by one specific other person. The film's subtle critique of media and public perception is deeply embedded in how easily Shrek is villainized by the surrounding populace. He is the subject of widespread, unfounded fear, an image cultivated entirely by reputation and hearsay, not actual misdeeds. This societal reaction to the unknown, or the non-standard, mirrors the instant categorization and subsequent condemnation often seen in modern media cycles, where nuance is sacrificed for sensationalism. Shrek's initial aversion to companionship is thus validated by constant, external reinforcement. Every glare, every muttered curse from a passing peasant confirms his worldview that he is fundamentally unwanted. This establishes a potent emotional landscape, where the viewer roots for the villain simply because he is the most honest person in the room. Donkey's relentless pursuit of connection acts as a necessary corrective to this isolation, serving as the film's primary source of emotional lubrication. His ability to see past the monstrous exterior stems from a place of profound personal need, suggesting that true empathy often arises not from objective observation, but from a desperate human hunger for alliance. Eddie Murphy's performance utilizes the high-octane, slightly desperate energy familiar from his stand-up routines, perfectly translating into a character who views silence as an existential threat. This contrasts beautifully with Shrek's meditative solitude, creating a relationship dynamic where one character demands engagement while the other defensively resists it, slowly learning that resistance is exhausting. Fiona's ordeal highlights the extreme pressure placed upon figures deemed valuable commodities, in her case, a royal bride. Her curse is the physical embodiment of the secret she must keep to remain marketable. The years spent in the tower practicing being the perfect princess, the soft voice, the gentle demeanor, underscore the physical and emotional labor required to maintain an idealized public image. When she finally fights Shrek, there is an unbridled joy in the movement that is absent from her daytime performance, a momentary release from the shackles of expectation. The climactic decision for both of them to embrace their ogre forms is a radical declaration of sovereignty over their own presentation. It is an active refusal to participate in the transactional beauty market represented by Farquaad. Lord Farquaad's tiny frame and massive ego function as a powerful, if comedic, statement on insecurity and power projection. His entire kingdom is a manifestation of overcompensation, a meticulously controlled, brightly colored prison designed to mask his own sense of deficiency. He represents the ultimate hollow success, possessing all the outward trappings of royalty without any genuine character or capacity for emotional connection. His reliance on a transaction, the marriage, to secure his title, proves that for him, narrative fulfillment is about ownership, not partnership. The resolution of his arc, being consumed by the fiercely independent dragon, is the symbolic erasure of artifice by untamed, authentic nature. The very thing Farquaad spent his entire life attempting to legislate out of existence. The film ultimately champions the messy, the complex, and the outwardly flawed as the only truly inhabitable spaces for genuine happiness. The sustained success of Shrek is rooted in its masterful employment of affective dissonance, wherein the audience's established emotional vocabulary for fairy tales is systematically betrayed. Shrek's identity as the ogre is not just a visual joke. It becomes a proxy for any marginalized identity that has been denied the right to a happy ending, simply based on aesthetics or background. His development isn't about becoming conventionally heroic, but about achieving the right to be left alone with someone he cares about. This subtle recalibration shifts the definition of heroism from conquest to acceptance. The introduction of the supporting fairy tale characters, marooned on his swamp, functions as an early indication of the film's thematic complexity regarding categorization. These creatures, Pinocchio, the gingerbread man, and the others, are not just narrative props. They are victims of simplistic branding. They embody stories that demand binary outcomes: good or evil, beautiful or hideous, human or monster. Their presence on the swamp forces Shrek to manage a community of the misunderstood, subtly teaching him that shared marginalization can breed a form of collective security. Donkey's persistence, is the emotional ballast that keeps Shrek from retreating permanently into bitterness. His humor, drawn from Murphy's kinetic, high-energy delivery, is a direct counterforce to Shrek's stoicism. Donkey's commentary often acts as the audience surrogate, voicing the desire for Shrek to stop sabotaging his own potential for happiness. Crucially, Donkey is never interested in the political or romantic stakes. He is only invested in the fundamental connection between beings, a purity of intention that eventually charms both Shrek and, unexpectedly, the formidable dragon. Their pairing is a secondary, yet equally vital narrative illustrating that deep compatibility ignores superficial metrics entirely. Fiona's commitment to hiding her nighttime reality speaks volumes about the systemic devaluation of female strength. She is physically capable, as demonstrated in her casual dispatching of the human guards, yet she is culturally trained to present as fragile and passive until the true hero arrives. Her curse is the ultimate manifestation of the societal pressure to appear effortlessly flawless. The relief she feels when she realizes Shrek is also a monster is profound. It is the moment she no longer has to perform femininity or heroism for him. Her choice to remain an ogre is an active, powerful redefinition of her own narrative destiny, a definitive rejection of the passive rescue fantasy. Lord Farquaad's tyranny is best understood as the tyranny of the superficial over the substantive. He doesn't just want a queen, he wants a pristine, legally binding asset that validates his insecure self-image. His kingdom of Duloc is the ultimate curated environment, devoid of spontaneity or true emotion, a perfect visual analog for the manufactured perfection the film critiques in traditional animation studios themselves. His need for control is absolute, and his utter failure to understand the value of genuine, messy love, as exemplified by Shrek and Fiona, seals his downfall. He seeks ownership, while Shrek seeks belonging, a core philosophical difference that drives the narrative conflict to its satisfying, counter-conventional